Welcome back. In case you're just joining us, it's still Moneyline with Nancy. At the beginning of the program, I did say we'll be looking at foreign aid in Africa. If indeed foreign aid is hurting or helping Africa. So many things to talk about today on the show. I hope we can do justice to this topic because it has many angles. And my guest is joining me right now, Professor Kenneth Kalu from Ryerson University, Toronto, Canada, at the Department of Global Management. Welcome, Prof.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm okay, and how are you?
I'm well, but can be better. Can be better. Welcome to the show. I know you've worked in different capacities. You worked with UBA, you just told me that. I didn't know about that. You've worked in several capacities.
Several sectors, yep.
Both in Nigeria and
overseas.
Now, we're talking about foreign aid and poverty in Africa. But let me start by asking you, because during the intro I did mention that the idea that most governments have, or even foreign agencies have, is the donation of large monies, so to speak, to remedy poverty or for even humanitarian purposes like the tsunami, what happened in Haiti and all of that. So you see developed nations moving into countries, not just in Africa, but other countries to help. That has dominated the theory of economic progress or economic advancement in the past few years. And I do know that this started perhaps in the 1950s, if I'm not wrong. But the question is, how has the result been so far? Which I'm trying to interrogate today on the show, because I know that you've done quite a lot of work in that regard. Some other people have also done a lot of work in that regard in assessing if foreign aid indeed has helped or hurt Africa.
Thank you. And,
I needed to give that background. So.
Yes, thank you. That's good. Thank you very much. That's a question that I get all the time. Let me start with these clarifications, and I feel like to put the record straight. First of all, we have to be grateful to our donors who have supported Nigeria and many other countries in Africa with lots of money and materials, sometimes also capacity building assistance in various ways. We have to be grateful to them. Many of those services have been helpful to our people in various ways. That has to be settled. But the question then is this: what the donors are doing, the support the donors are providing, the aid they are bringing, the commodities, and the capacity building programs that they are funding, what is it doing? Do all these have the capacity to produce the result that the donors and some economists believe it will produce? That is the question. Do foreign aids in any form have the capacity to produce development? When I say development, we are talking about development that would, help people to move away from position of poverty to a position of, moving people from poverty level, position of mass poverty to a position of shared prosperity. Is foreign aid in any form able to produce that? That is the question. And the answer, unfortunately, is no.
Would it have even provided that? Because if you take a look at the level of foreign aid, that's the level of inflow of foreign aid into Africa now, vis-a-vis the rate of development at which Africa needs to develop, is still little. Because if we're saying $50 billion annually to African countries are foreign aid, African countries, do they need $50 billion to remedy poverty for advancement, economic advancement?
Of course, the answer is, first of all, is no. But in some countries, the smaller countries like Malawi, some other countries like Uganda, the volume of aid is actually huge compared to the, other sectors of the economy. But even in those countries where the volume of aid is huge relative to the size of the economy, foreign aid cannot produce development. It doesn't have the capacity so to do. The assumption, which is wrong, a very wrong assumption that donors make and some development economists make, is that lack of money is a cause of poverty. And what I'm finding, my book, I articulated it very clearly in my book, which I just published, Foreign Aid and the Future of Africa. What we are saying is this: lack of money, that is the gap that donors want to fill, is not a cause of poverty. Lack of money is a consequence of poverty. So if you're going to treat a problem, you don't treat the symptoms of those problems, you don't treat the consequence, you treat the cause of the problem. Providing money to the poor, just money, will not necessarily help them move away from poverty. In countries, in any state, what brings about shared prosperity is the nature of the institutions of the state. Does the state provide an environment for every agent? When I say every agent, I mean every individual, every corporation, every family, to be able to actualize their own God-given dreams, to contribute meaningfully in the political and economic sphere. That is key. Once you have institutions that are not able to give people opportunity, poverty is the first result. It doesn't, So when donors bring funds to help, they can help us solve some of the problems of poverty. They can help us solve some of the signs of institutional failure. They can help us soothe the pains of those institutional failure, but they don't get to the root of the problem. That is the issue. So when donors say they are checking the effectiveness of foreign aid, even when economists talk about it, they're looking at how foreign aid has helped or failed to help African countries to move away from poverty. They're actually doing the wrong thing. Because you don't assess something that does not have the capacity to do that. It doesn't have the capacity to produce development or to fight poverty. When you see celebrities, they sometimes organize concerts all over the world. They may have the best of intentions to raise funds. They say making poverty history in Africa. They want to make poverty history in Africa. How? By raising money. No. They are assuming that not enough money, giving money to countries will help those countries move away from poverty. That is wrong. Like I said, do not get me wrong. These donors, these celebrities, they may have good intentions, but they are missing the mark.
So from what you're saying, in essence, Prof, is that money alone isn't the solution.
Money isn't the solution.
Now, the question is, if you take a look at the difference between developed and developing nations, at least from my study and research or doing the show like every day,
yes,
I've seen that the difference between developing and developing nations is also, one of the differences, their political evolution. Developed countries have political and economic systems that are inclusive and create opportunities for wealth for their citizens.
Yes.
But sadly, in Africa, the political and economic systems are extractive, as it were, where you also have the ruling class having a political stronghold and channeling economic resources to themselves
only,
or people around them. So, can that shackle be broken?
Thank you. Yeah, actually, that is, the crux of my research over the past 3 years. I just produced a book that I call State-Society Relations, Africa's Big Men, Predatory State-Society Relations.
So Africa's big men are predators, the lions and the hyenas. And
yes, but let us also, when I talk about these things, I also want to make it clear that it is not necessarily, it doesn't mean that the people occupying public offices are evil. They are not patently bad people. The problem is this: the institutions in place, the institutions that we inherited from several years of extraction and exploitation, colonial exploitation, till today has remained the same. Extractive institutions, institutions that serve only a tiny elite. That is the problem. So our development partners, what they are missing is the centrality of the state. The state is very central. The state and institutions are very, very central to any development program. So what is the way forward? The way forward is for us to critically, like you just said, in advanced economies, in developed economies, they create inclusive opportunities. They have opportunities for every individual to do well in some way. Those are inclusive institutions. So the way forward for development partners and economists is to critically take a look at the state. That has been the missing link. You know, sometimes they talk about economic policies. They say privatize. Government should privatize, sell off industries to private sector. As other times, they will say government should get involved in businesses. Some, you know, in the late 80s and early 90s, we adopted structural adjustment program, which was more about liberalization, selling off government assets and all that, privatizing. What is the result?
We are still in that doldrum till today.
Thank you. In the 1960s and early 70s, it was national development planning when government played active roles in the economy. What was the result? The same poverty. So it's not about the beauty or the nature of the economic policy. It is about the framework, the level of the state. You know, the way is the state predatory. Predatory states are states that essentially focus on taking away the commonwealth for the benefit of a tiny elite. Those are predatory states. And it doesn't matter who is in office. It doesn't matter, it's not about the personality. It's that even citizens somehow in predatory states tend to accept it as their lot. So that's the question. So for those donors, for those foreign partners who want to help African countries develop, first of all, we have to look at how the state is, the nature of the state. Is the state able to initiate, to execute, and to sustain policies and programs that will lead to shared prosperity? But
we seem not to have gotten that right, because if you take a look at even the aids that come, or the aid that come to Africa,
yes,
they also come with attachments and conditions.
Conditions, yes.
So to speak. But at the end of the day, we also see that one way or the other, that aid has also, you know, aided, if I'm to use that now, yes, aid has also aided some kind of problems that that Africans have, perhaps civil conflicts, corruption, shrinking of, you know, the wealth of the nation, and all of that. So you see that some African leaders have also channeled those
to the wrong purposes.
For the wrong purposes.
That's actually I am some school of thought. There is a famous author, Dambisa Moyo.
Yes, I was coming to that.
Yeah, she said
Dead Aid.
Dead Aid.
Author of Dead Aid.
Dead Aid, yes. The author of Dead Aid. She said aid is the cause of Africa's problems. I mean, she has a point, but I have a different opinion. Even before foreign aid became pervasive, became, you know, a central subject in Africa's political economy, we had these poverty issues, we have problems, you know. I see that aid, the major thing is that aid can create problems, but it can also help to solve some of the problems. There's something we call institutional destruction consequence of aid. You know, what do we mean when we say it can destroy institutions? Let's take an example, say in the public health arena. Sometimes when donors bring direct projects, you know, they want to implement projects, donors sometimes take away resources from the national system, you know, to, you know, support their own project, because donors can pay better and all that. So somehow donor projects can kind of weaken national system. That is one way that aid can create problem. Another way, like you mentioned, is that some leaders can channel aid funds to the wrong purposes. Yes. But even when aid is effectively delivered for what they say it will deliver, even when aid is effectively used to buy mosquito nets to fight malaria, or to buy antiretroviral drugs, yes, even when they do that, it still doesn't mean that aid can procure development. It can suit the pains of public health failure. It cannot lead to growth in development.
So where do you stand, Prof? Because I'm trying to calibrate where you stand. Yes. Is foreign aid helpful or is it hurtful to Africa? Yeah, which one? Quickly, before we take a break. Harmful or helpful?
It's not here or there. And that's why I've articulated in my book, it can be helpful. It can be helpful, but it can be helpful in suiting the pains. It cannot procure what they say it will procure.
You want to drag me further. I've got to go for a break. But the issue is, for the past 50-something years, yes, and since the 1950s, since foreign aid and all of that. Has it been helpful? Because if we look in retrospect, has it been helpful or hurtful?
In some ways, it has been helpful. In other ways, it has been hurtful. If we are looking at fighting poverty, aid is not it. It's not an instrument to fight poverty. It can suit the pains of poverty.
Let's quickly take this break. It's getting interesting with Professor Kalu, but let's quickly take this break. We'll be right back.
Millions of business deals and financial events occur across the world. From tiny ones that affect a small business to decisions that affect the global business world. Moneyline with Nancy gives you a daily dose of all the business, financial and economic moves happening in Nigeria, Africa and the globe.
This is your preferred destination for business, finance, economy, market and investment. Of course.
We track both dovish and hawkish stands of Monetary Policy Committee and fiscal authorities' decisions that impact the economy. We crunch the numbers, provide up-to-the-minute reports on bullish and bearish trends in global stock markets. We have smart conversations with those that make things happen in the business world and a whole lot of fun. Follow Nigeria's journey to sustainable economic growth on Moneyline with Nancy, where money matters matter. Join Nancy Nnaji weekdays at 11 a.m. on AIT as she brings you the world in business. Moneyline with Nancy. Be ahead. Stay ahead.
All right, welcome back. In case you're just joining us, we're having an interesting conversation concerning foreign aid, if it's indeed helping or hurting Africa. Professor Kenneth Kalu from the Ryerson University, Toronto, Canada, is with me here. So we're moving to the second half of the interview, which will also take us to the concluding part of it. Now, let's quickly take some of the data for you so that you can understand what we're talking about. Africa receives $50 billion annually as foreign aid. The United States is the largest foreign aid donor to Nigeria, followed by the EU, the IDA, like I said earlier on. Most foreign aid in Nigeria supports health, HIV/AIDS, immunization, malaria, also supports education as well as agriculture. Africa makes up about 20% of U.S. aid recipients. Egypt, South Sudan, and Kenya are the biggest beneficiaries in Africa. USAID has provided about $89 million in new assistance to Nigeria in 2018, $44 million as HIV/AIDS control, $15 million agri productivity and economic growth, $11 million education, $10.5 million good governance, $9 million water and sanitation infrastructure. Nigeria has received a total of $808.5 million from the United States alone under its 5-year assistance agreement. And U.S. has provided $526.7 million in humanitarian assistance to Nigeria since 2017. This is just for Nigeria. If you take a look at other countries, I did tell you earlier that the top 10 countries that receives ODA, that is official development assistance. Ethiopia is number 1, Egypt, Kenya, Tanzania, and Nigeria is number 5. I will come to Nigeria in a bit, but let me talk about this nascent issue, which is that of Rwanda. Rwanda receives about 64 million pounds from the UK. Just some days ago, or last week, or was it, that we got the news that Rwanda that receives foreign aid is in a sponsorship arrangement with Arsenal FC, the famous football club. $30 million given to Arsenal as a sponsorship deal for 3 years. Though Rwanda has come up to say, no, it's not up to $30 million, but whatever it is for a 3-year period, about £10 million. This angered
the
populace and the parliament. Imagine, those we are giving monies to, and they have money to give to Arsenal, and Arsenal FC is in their own, is in the UK. Is it justifiable?
Anyway, I mean,
this is a country that suffered genocide. Is still trying to
get, and they are actually fairly doing well.
Yes, they are fairly doing well, but could do better.
Yes. Anyway, that I haven't heard about the gift to Arsenal, and I know.
Are you hearing it from me?
I'm hearing from you, and
it's
all over the place.
Yes.
Okay, I haven't been following that. I know that many countries in Africa, including Rwanda, receive lots of aid. And over the past few years now, very few years, post-conflict Rwanda, things are looking up. It comes back to the issue, what we are talking about, the ability of foreign aid to actually produce development. Just, you've given an example of Rwanda that receives so much money, and is even, instead of focusing on building the infrastructure that will lift most of its people out of poverty, is making the wrong move, because it's the wrong move. It's actually the wrong move. So it comes back to what I'm finding. They
defended it and said it's for tourism, because the Arsenal players will put on their jerseys, there will be visit Rwanda.
If it is, if it is based on a very rigorous study, a rigorous survey that shows clearly how that kind of donation, if it can be considered an investment, will produce results for Rwandan citizens, that I can understand. But the issue, one thing all donors should have in mind is that sending money is not, doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't. Sending commodities or money in whatever form doesn't solve the problem. That is actually what has been missing. Besides donors, those who give us policy support, who come around, IMF and World Bank people, and they say, we're going to help your Ministry of Finance to develop, they miss it too. Because they assume that the framework, the system that will help those policies to be implemented effectively, they assume that that system exists. But my research is showing that it doesn't exist. Those systems do not exist.
Okay, let me ask you this question, which is quite fundamental, because a lot of people would also say that the persistence of poverty in Nigeria and other African countries is also due to external forces who tend to keep Africa impoverished. Do you think that the problem is largely internal? It's like, that these Western forces, they want to perpetually keep Africa in poverty and impoverished. Or do you think most of our problems are internal?
Nancy, that is it happens all the time. That's something that people have chosen, one theory, if you like, that some people have chosen to believe. I do not believe in the conspiracy theory, the theory that our foreign external forces want to keep us. Why? How? Who is running our various countries? I thought we say we gained independence in the 1960s. Sometimes these same donors, when they come with some kind of policy support, when they tell us to reform institutions, we say sovereignty. They cannot, tell us how to run our countries. So at which point do we make that change between, the foreign donors being the one that is making us poor, and then...
And if you also need assistance, you run to them.
And you run to them. So no country has developed by focusing on external donors. Development can only be achieved through conscious program of national planning. You have to, when I say national planning, I'm not saying it has to be government getting involved in all businesses. Planning can be, you can plan to have a market economy, but you have to plan, you have to have a structure that will support growth. And when I talk about this, I say, it's not about the nature of your economic development program. That is why you see some market economies doing so well, like you have in the US and other Western countries. But you also see state-controlled economies doing well as well, like China, like Malaysia, like Singapore. So it's not about the nature of the policy. It's about the state, and that is what has been missing. Okay,
Prof, because we have just 3 minutes to the end of the show, and I want to muster a lot in that 3 minutes.
Thank you.
I'll need you to answer very quickly.
Yes.
The recent World Poverty Clock rated Nigeria as the poverty capital
of the world.
One would say, with all the international support and all of that, why would Nigeria still be the poverty capital of the world? Though some people will also disagree with whether Nigeria is a poverty capital or not. But the thing is that there's poverty inherent in the land.
It's not, that's data. I don't know who is disagreeing with that. Why will Nigeria continue to be poverty capital of the world? One, we have large population. It's not about a number of people. And we have so many people who are poor, really, below what the World Bank defines as the poverty line. Why will Nigeria continue why is Nigeria still poor, like many other African countries? Because the institutions of the states are not creating enough inclusive Yes, environment for everybody to shine. You know, it's sometimes even when you see countries like Angola and Nigeria reporting high GDP growth, consistently for several years. You
we
know,
did that for many years.
Yeah, for
like
many years
7,
still,
8
but
years.
poverty remains endemic. That should make economists to begin to see what I'm seeing based on my findings. That look, it's not about policy, it's not about foreign aid, it's about looking inward to target, you know, the framework. You know, let's give another example. When the poor in many African countries migrate to other societies that have inclusive institutions, inclusive economic system, they begin to succeed.
Okay, final question. Where do you see the global aid industry going in the next few years? Very quickly.
The global, first of all, we are seeing some kind of donor fatigue. You know, that's, donors are saying, are we even doing the wrong thing? Poverty has remained persistent in Africa and many other countries. I see a kind of coming together to think through, and that's what my book is calling about. My book, I am asking for a redesign, a redefinition of the global foreign aid architecture.
So like a remodeling?
Remodeling of the global development assistance program. Because right now it is not development assistance, it's something else. It's actually suiting the signs of poverty. It has to be remodeled to target the root causes of poverty. How we're going to do that, it can take any form, but we have to focus on the causes of poverty, not the symptoms of poverty.
You know, I said at the beginning of the program, it's a huge topic that we need to dissect, which we can't finish on an edition of the program. But I think at least we've been able to put in some kind of perspectives. I want to say sincere thanks to you for joining me on the program today.
My pleasure.
All right, I've been speaking with Professor Kenneth Kalu from Ryerson University, Toronto, Canada, at the Department of Global Management. We've been talking about foreign aid in Africa, if it has indeed helped or hurt Africa. That's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. Many thanks for joining us. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see.